Functions in Java. Let's talk about functions and how they work in a program. So basically, functions allow us to segment our code, to create these building blocks that we can put together to build a total program. Okay, so the fundamental thing about a function is it does work. Okay, so there's three major components of a function. It requires input, it does work on some type of data, and it produces a result. Okay, now we have choices. Where do we ask for the function? So the function can get data from the main program, or the function that it is being called by, or within the actual function itself. Okay, then it creates a result. So it can give the result back to the main program, or the function that it was called by, or it can give the result within the function itself. So you notice here we have four total combinations, and we're going to work through those combinations for the functions here. So let's look at the basic components of a function. And the functions start, okay, right after public class and then before the static void main. Okay, so they start there. And they go to right here. So between that area right there. You can also put functions between these two brackets here, between the static void main and the end of the class. So you can actually put them in this area too. Can you spread them between both? You could, but that's not good form. So I like to put mine at the very top. Okay, so basically we're going to take a function here and that's going to be required to add two numbers together. So that's the work it's going to do. It's going to add two numbers together, and then it's going to produce the result. So let's look at the components of a function. So first off, our functions are going to start off with static and then a data type. So if we're dealing with numbers, this will be a double or a float. If we're dealing with whole numbers, that'll be an int or long. If we're dealing with strings, that'll be a string. Then we have our function name. It follows the same rules that we do here for variables. And then we have the components of the parentheses. Okay, so if we're getting information from outside the function, okay, this is where we do it, within the parentheses. So where we get input from another source, they're always going to go right here within the parentheses. Now in this version of our function here, we're going to be asking for two numbers. Okay, a number 1 and a number 2, and we're also stating here that they have to be doubles. So we're going to get information from the main program or from whatever function that calls it. Okay, we're going to add these two together, so we're going to need a variable to store the answer, and then we're going to return that answer back to the main program. Now I want to point something out here. We have braces here. So what happens between the braces stays between the braces, and these variables here are attached to those braces. So what I'm getting at is this. You'll notice here I have total. Okay, in no way, shape, or form is this variable related to this variable. They're considered separate variables. Okay, they are not related. The computer does not, this function where this is at, does not even see this one up here. Okay, because what happens in the braces stays within the braces. So we're going to get two numbers from the main program on here. We're going to put those in here, add the two numbers together, and then return this back to the main program. So let's look how this is dealt with in the main program. So let's go down here to the main part of the program. And just to let you know what you're seeing here, I've got a couple of numbers here that we're going to request here in the main program. So where's this added at? Where are we using this at? We'll look down here. Okay, we have a system out to our user, and it says please enter two numbers. And so our user is going to enter two numbers in the main program. Now we're going to call our function here. Okay, so that's the name of our function. Add two nums A. Okay, and we're going to supply them with our two variables. Okay, they are our variables. They're not the same variables that are up in the top, but we're plopping our two variables into our parentheses. So what's going to happen is we put our two variables in the parentheses here. Okay, we call the function, so it's going to pop up to our function with our two variables in here. Okay, it's going to add the two, and it's going to return the total. I want to point something out here. Data type will be here. So if I got a double here, we have to return a variable that's of a double. Okay, of the same data type. So total is a double. So we're going to return the total back to the main program. So it pops back down to here. It's going to put our answer. Okay, it's going to return an answer, and we're going to store that answer into X total, and then we're going to display the answer in the main program with the system out. Okay, so that's the first version of a function. So we're getting the information, the input, we're getting the input, and we're displaying the result in the main program, or the function that called it. Okay, so now let's look at the second way we can write that very same function. So the second way we can write that function, you'll notice it looks almost identical to the first function. So if I'll pull them up here, you can see both of them here. They're almost identical, okay, with one exception. Look right here. We have a system out. There is no system out on the first function, but we have one here. So what are we doing? We're going to get the two numbers from the main program. We have our variable here to store the total, and this total is in no way, shape related to that total. As a matter of fact, these variables are no way, shape related to those variables. We're going to add the two numbers together, and then we're going to store and show the total within the function itself. So we're not returning anything to the main program. So you'll notice, look here, return. Okay, it's just a plain return. There's nothing being returned to the main program. Look here, void. So this is basically saying this function is not returning anything because a void is nothing. Okay, so we're going to return nothing to whatever calls this function. We're going to display the answer here in the function. Okay, so between the first two, all we're doing between the two is here we return the answer in A back to the main program. In B, we're going to give the answer in the function itself. Okay, not hard, just a different variation. Now, how do we use that in the main program? Let's look at it in the main program. So let's look at it in the main program here. Okay, we're still asking for, we put a message out, please enter two numbers, and we're still asking for two numbers. Okay, and we're going to give those two numbers here and here. But you'll notice, look here, we're just calling the function itself. We don't have to store anything. Here it gave a result back and we had to store the answer back in here. But since the answer is being given in the function, okay, we don't have to return anything or we don't have to print anything out because that's being taken care of within the function. Let's look at a third way we can write this very same function. So in this variation here, okay, what we're going to do here is we're not, you notice the parentheses are empty. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're asking the question here for two numbers. So we've moved the input request to the function. Okay, once again then we're going to do work on the function, work on the numbers, get a total, and then we're going to return the total back to the main program. Now since we're returning an answer back to the main program, okay, look here, double. Okay, so the function here, we're telling the computer function C, add to num C, is going to create a result of a double and return that back to whatever function called that. Okay, so how's that looking in the main program? Let's go look. So we still need a variable to hold the answer, but look here. There's going to be nothing in the parentheses. Okay, the parentheses are empty. Why? Because the function is asking the question, is asking for the input. So in this variation here, version C, the function is going to be asking for the input, but it's still going to return an answer. And then we still have to print out the answer here in the main program. Okay? Now let's look at the last variation of the same function on this. So let's go back and look at the last variation. Look what we're doing here. We're asking for the input. We're gathering the input right here. We're doing work on our data. And then we're also giving the answer out. So we're getting the input here. We're doing the work. And we're also giving the result. All within the function. So we're letting the function do everything. Get the input, do the work, show the result. So once again, if we're getting the input within the function itself, our parentheses are empty. And since we're giving the answer within the function, we're not going to return anything back to the program that called it. The data type is going to be void. Okay, so the function is doing everything. So how does that look in the main program? Let's go look. Look here. Since the function is doing everything, we call the function, and the function is collecting the input, doing the work, and showing the answer. So all we have to do is just call it. We don't have to do anything else. That's how it looks right here. So that's the 4 ways we can write that same function. Now I want to show you another real quick example here with strings. So here, just to let you know here, are we tied to doubles? Nope, I just wanted to show you here. Here's an example with a string. And what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate a string and return that string back to the main program. So we're getting here a first name and a last name from the main program, whatever program that called it. Okay, and we're going to store the full name in a string. So basically here we have hello, first name, and last name, and then we're going to return that back to the main program. So since we're returning here, look, these have to match. String, full name is a string. We're going to return that back to the main program. So this is how it looks in the main program. So we're asking for their first name, we're asking for their last name, we're calling the function, okay, so we're giving it the first name and last name that we collected. It's going to go up to the function, create the string, and then it's going to come back down and give us the string, hello, John Doe, or whatever we typed in here, and we're going to store it here. And then we're going to print that whole string out here. So we're actually printing the answer out, the result, here. Okay? So you're not tied to one specific data type. And I want to show you here just another quick function here. Here's a function I have out here. It's basically creating a default password. And we're basically going to use their last name and the birth year. Notice here, we're using a string and an int. Okay, and then we're combining that to another whole string. Okay, my point being in here is you can also mix data types. So that is how you can create a function, and that's how you can use functions in a program.